Hi, and welcome to Meandering Miles. If this is your first time here, I'm Adam. Last year, I had the opportunity to take what I call the Grand Detour, a 112-day, 18,000-mile solo motorcycle trip across the US and a little bit of Canada. It was an incredible experience, and I met some wonderful people. I've spent the past few months putting it all up online on YouTube. But today's episode is a little different. Instead of diving into one of my own travel stories, I'm joined by a fellow motorcycle rider with some amazing stories of his own. Ken Hollis is a longtime rider based in the Seattle area, and we first connected on BlueSky after I posted my video about Mesa Verde. And Ken and I are getting together today to talk motorcycles and specifically motorcycle touring and traveling, something that we both love to do. So thank you, Ken, for joining me on my first ever interview for the channel. Really glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Good talking to you.
Yeah, so let's start with how and when did motorcycles first become a part of your life?
So I started riding motorcycles back in around 2013. I did it late in life for actually riding them. I've been wanting to ride them for a long time, but things just didn't line up. And in the end, it's probably better being older. I'm a little bit more careful than I would have been if I had been younger when I had ridden. So now I can understand, where the possible dangers could be and also have the ability to get really good gear. I have my gear is Kevlar and it's head to foot zip in. So yeah, as good. It's good that I was getting on motorcycles later rather than earlier in life when I may not have appreciated at all the gear all the time.
Absolutely. And so what was the first motorcycle you ever bought?
So my first one was a 2000s Triumph Sprint.
Hmm.
Um, the biggest thing on it was that it had panniers and it wasn't a 300 cc. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5" plus, so I didn't want to be on one of those bikes where I look like a monkey in a circus. So
Hmm.
I was shooting for more like 650, but the Sprint, which was a leader bike, a 951, I think, cc's, but it's a pretty big bike, and it's a sport bike, but it had panniers, so I went with it because I could put my computer in there when I went to work.
Yeah.
But
Also, it was a commuter bike.
It was more of a commuter bike, but I also didn't want my bike that was the one that was, I'm gonna love forever because I figured, and I was right, I was gonna drop it. And I would be so sad if it was my, star bike and I dropped it.
Mhm.
So
So you have more than one now.
yes, I
What do you have?
I also got a 100-year anniversary Harley,
Hmm.
which was the bike that I loved back when that first came out. And I always lusted after one, got that one. Unfortunately, it's passed on to the great junkyard in the sky. But I also had a BMW K1600, and that's really where I started doing the touring. So that was the big touring bike that I rode with for several years with my wife. Her on the back, me riding the bike, and we loaded it and went all over the western U.S. I mean, you've got the map up there. We were all the way down in the northern rim of the Grand Canyon.
Hmm.
And so that bike we took on several thousand miles, went over to Colorado, which is why I noted your Mesa Verde part, because we didn't manage to get there. And that's something that I'm going to have to take your map and look and see which parts of it I want to do, because there's a lot of that I want to do.
Well, I'm more than happy to send you any of my maps and GPX files and routes. Make sure you can get everywhere you want to go. So
Great.
So what
So
kind of riding brings you that sort of the most joy and satisfaction? Is it the long tour or the
it's the long tour. So I won't go into my K1600. It's also passed to the great junkyard in the sky. But now I'm riding both a Harley 2005 Road King, which has lots of lots of power, enough power in the lower end, and has enough that I can put on it
Hmm.
that I can go camping. But the one that I just got was the Triumph Tiger. So that one is, and that's why I bring that up is your question of long distance riding. The uh, the problem with a lot of bikes is that they have a tank that doesn't hold quite enough gas to go far in the West. In the West, you can see 100 plus, as you well know, 100 plus miles between gas stations.
Hmm.
And on the Harley Road King, I'm pushing it if I go more than about 120. I looked at bikes, and BMW is a great bike, but they had just upgraded the engine to a 1300 cc from 1250, and I didn't want to be one of their beta testers. So I decided to go with the Triumph Tiger, which has a 7.9 gallon gas tank and about 45 miles per gallon. That's what I've been getting on it. The other thing is that it does have a, I'm like I said, I'm a big guy, so I got to be careful about how much I put on it because it has about 450 pounds that it can carry. So with my tank and all my gear, I'm probably pushing that upper limit. So that's another thing on the specs is making sure your bike can carry everything you need it, but its distance and what you're going to be going back. So the reason why I got into it is my Zen is just getting out on the road. Normal vacations, it takes 2 to 3 days to unwind and actually get into it. With motorcycling, because you are keeping your mind on the trip, you get into it quicker and you're just enjoying the views and enjoying the travels.
So once you get on the bike and get out of your local town, it's the fog lifts and you can.
Right, right. All the planning you hopefully have done is going to work out for you.
Hmm. And so when you plan your trips and plan your days, are you looking for long distances, twisty roads, technically challenging? What kinds of days? What's the perfect day for you?
Yes. So I look for not highways
Uh-huh.
because riding along at 70, 80 miles an hour is with going by huge trucks isn't particularly my idea of a fun ride.
No.
So I have Butler maps on my, I have a website on all this stuff, and everything on my website are things that I have bought and used personally, and they work. Butler Maps is one of those that is, I recommend highly. It has, as you said, all the technical roads on there, all the stuff that, you might want to explore. And I use the Butler maps and my GPS to plan my route day by day, and I look for roads that are wide open and roads that have twisties on them. So
Mhm.
I kind of plan that into the route. So yeah, that's a good, excellent point about how you want to ride.
Yeah, I always look for roads that if I see that the road goes along a river,
Yep.
those are ones that always resonate with me because you know that they're not too steep, they're twisty, and they just go on, and the views are always spectacular.
So I was in between. I was changing jobs from one job to another in the same company, and my new manager said, "Why don't you take a couple of weeks off? I know you ride motorcycles." So I did, and I went out to Elk City, Idaho,
Oh,
and
nice.
people were like, "What's in Elk City, Idaho?" And it's exactly what you said. There's nothing there, literally nothing. I think there's a hotel, but it's 40 some odd miles along a riverbank.
Mhm.
You're down in these canyons and you're just following the river, and it was absolutely beautiful.
You bring up Idaho. Is Lolo Pass on your list of accomplishments?
I've been on Lolo Pass several times. It's a perfect from Western Washington. It's a perfect ride to take
Hmm.
to get to Yellowstone. So that's usually how I do that: is go through Lolo Pass, go through, is it Missoula,
Hmm.
Montana, and then head over into Wyoming for Yellowstone. It looks like you went through Yellowstone on your ride.
I did. I actually I came down from Canada and went through Glacier and then
Okay.
down to Kalispell, Missoula, and then did Lolo Pass and then did a loop through Idaho, and it was gorgeous. Stanley, Idaho, and then back up to Missoula, and then I went back to Glacier because the first time I had gone through it was raining, and I really wanted to do the going to the Sun Road, and so I went back up to Glacier and spent a few days doing the roads up there,
Oh,
and then
that's a
went down to Yellowstone.
that's an amazing road going to the sun. I haven't done it on a motorcycle yet. I understand now you have to make reservations if you want to do it. If you're going from the west side to the east side, but if you go from east to west, you can go anytime you want. So
That's the trick, yes.
yeah, that's the trick. And I want to do that sometime on my bike
Yeah,
because that is amazing.
it's an incredible ride. Um I was staying at the that they have a kind of a motel on the east side and in the park, and then rode east to west and then turned around and rode back west to east. And that was just an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous day.
Nice, nice. Yeah.
Although it's a little cliffy,
Yeah.
if you're not great with heights and cliffs, it can be a little challenging.
Did you hit the Continental Divide several times on that trip or just once or twice?
Oh, several times.
Okay. That's another one that I aim for is a Continental Divide on a mountain pass road that I can find that's not, interstate highway
Hmm.
because those are always just, they're up there and they're usually pretty high and they've got beautiful scenery all around.
I did when I was down in Colorado. I did Wolf Creek Pass.
Okay. How was
Um,
that?
that was beautiful, and I got incredibly lucky because the following day it was closed for snow. But the
Okay.
day I rode, it was absolutely blue sky, gorgeous. And I got into Pagosa Springs and just had a great time. But the next day, it was closed.
You mentioned an excellent part of all of this is planning your ride and making sure that everything's open because in the Western United States with all those passes, some of them don't open until June.
Hmm.
So like the Route 20 just opened a week or so ago, and that was a good 3 or 4 weeks ahead of schedule. So all the states usually have pass and openings or not. So you gotta plan your ride before you planning to me probably is just as important as the ride itself to make sure that I don't get in trouble.
So tell me about that. What do you use to plan, and how do you think about planning a ride?
So I have Garmin GPS.
Hmm.
You obviously use GPX points, so I assume you have Garmin also. But I go through, I have my Butler, I'm looking at Route 66 right now. So I have my Butler map for Route 66, and then I have this book that I looked up online that I bought for Route 66 that tells me all the things. So between that and the Garmin, I'm going to plan out day by day, throw in my stop points and my waypoints for, what's interesting,
Hmm.
get it all done on a day by day by day, and hoping that it's all that I get it all correct. But anyway, and then the entire route. So that trip is probably going to take me about 20 or 30 days to do because I'm going to go down to Los Angeles, start at the Santa Monica Pier, go west to Chicago, following Route 66 as close as I can. As far as I understand, there are parts of it that really aren't road anymore. They're people's private properties. So
Oh, okay.
I may not be 100% successful, but I'm going to try and be as true to the route as I can.
Hmm.
Um, Go to Chicago, and then I'm going to head straight north up to Canada and travel through Canada back to the Seattle area
Wow.
because as you know, Trans-Canada Highway is up there. I think you rode some of it, didn't you?
I don't think I was on the Trans Canada Highway specifically, but I did
Okay.
the Icefields Parkway,
Okay.
From Jasper down to Banff and Calgary, and I did a loop from Osoyoos up to Kelowna and Kamloops, and then up to Jasper.
Man, that's all beautiful part of Canada. And that's on riding the Columbia River. I rode the entire length of the Columbia River. I got on parts of the Trans-Canada Highway,
Hmm.
which is Highway 1. The biggest danger was looking around at all the scenery and not paying attention to the road.
It,
So,
it can get a little distracting with
yeah.
all the scenery, especially when you're on the Columbia River is a beautiful
Oh
ride.
yeah.
When we talked earlier, said you spent some time at the John Day the John Day area and that
Yes.
in that part of the in that part of Oregon, and you have
Then
a
right.
I think you told me you have a Pendleton blanket story that you wanted to
Yes.
tell.
So another vacation I took was on the Harley, the Road King, um, with its sometimes 35 miles per gallon, so it drank some gas. But
That's pretty good.
yeah, it got me around. But I wanted to go see John Day fossil beds, Painted
Hmm.
Hills. If you look up John Day fossil beds, the great thing about it is that it's hardly visited. You know, all these national parks they talk about, they're like, oh yeah, you know, you go there during the summer, you're going to have lines and lines. John Day is not that much visited. But I had just gotten this was my first moto camping trip, and I'd gotten my tent. But I thought, you know, I'm going to need another blanket, something to keep warm. And Pendleton, Oregon is right there on the way. Pendleton uh, has blankets. The amazing thing is they use some of the Native American designs, and they have partnered with the Native Americans to make sure that they're not appropriating cultural icons inappropriately. The one that I got was done by a Native American artist, and it's huge. It's a great blanket. I love it. And so, and I wanted that specifically because I love them. But I got it home, and my wife said, "I want to look at that blanket sometime that you paid $300 for." I said, "Yeah, but I saved all this money on motels." But she said, "I still want to look at it." So a few months later, I unrolled the the tent and got it out of there and brought it in. She looked at it and she said, "You know, that's a piece of artwork." I said, "Oh, no, it's a nice warm blanket." And she said, "No, it's artwork. It's going to go up on the wall until you need it again to go camping."
Oh, so you are allowed to take it when you go camping, but it has
Yes,
to go
yeah,
back it has to get cleaned and back on the wall.
right. It has to go back up on the wall. But John Day was amazing. Saw the Painted Hills. One of my camping spots is basically a fishing camp. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I want to say it's Clyde something, but it's on my list. But I got there, $5. You're supposed to put it in an envelope that has a little box there. I think there were two other people at this huge fishing camp. It was right on the river. Beautiful, beautiful scenery. Um, and you know, of course, I had my water and my battery backup, but it was an amazing night. The other thing I did was go visit Hell's Canyon, which is just east, and it is deeper than the national the Grand Canyon down in Arizona. So not many people know that, but there is a canyon deeper than the Grand Canyon, and again, fantastic ride up through that Hell's Canyon. I think it's a national park. Pretty sure it is. It's the other advantage
Okay.
I love of being on the West Coast. I know you're over on the East Coast, but West Coast has, I think, 70%, 80% of the national parks over here. It's a huge percentage of all the parks. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, there's quite a few. I know I went on my trip, I went to 29 national parks.
okay.
So I got a fair sampling of all of the parks. And yeah, the from Joshua Tree to Crater Lake to Oregon
Oh,
Caves to Yellowstone um,
Yellowstone is another
and
one I
Glacier.
visited multiple times, but you mentioned all the ones that are the highlights. That I love Joshua Tree.
Hmm.
Joshua Tree is, and you asked about my favorite riding.
Yeah.
The other one I love is the semi-arid desert out here.
Hmm.
Wide open expanses, and you just look out and you're by yourself. You don't see cars for 15, 20 minutes.
Hmm.
So you better have a plan for breaking down. But
Funny
but
you should say that. I just I as we're having this conversation, I've just finished my video for days 40 and 41, which was going through Death Valley.
okay.
And but I haven't published it yet. And one of the sections in there is when I crossed into Death Valley, I went 55 miles without seeing another vehicle, person, power line,
Anything.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just incredible the distances there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I carry with me about the only thing I could fix on my bike, which is a flat tire. So I carry a plug and a power pump that
Nice.
that's off the battery.
Hmm.
And yeah, other than that, yeah, yeah, it's consideration to get one of those Garmin InReach, I think it's called. I'm thinking about getting one of those sometime if I do long distance, in the middle of nowhere traveling like you did in Death Valley.
Well, we can talk about that. I do have one of the Garmin InReach devices, and it's something that I take with me every time I go because I know that cell reception is, especially out west, cell reception just can't count on it.
Right,
And I think about, if there's ever a real emergency, I may not be where my phone is, and so I
right.
need to have a pretty precise location to help emergency folks find me.
So that's an excellent point again about being out in the middle of nowhere, no cell reception. So
Hmm.
you got to have backup plans. So yeah, that's the other part of planning a trip is your backup plans to make sure that you've got. I mean, nobody can tell you how safe you should feel.
Right.
I'm thinking about going up to the Alcan Highway from the Northwest up to Alaska. That's one that there's another book that I haven't purchased yet, but I think it's mile by mile or something like that, but it tells you every mile what's there.
Oh, wow.
And you can plan your stops and make sure that you have enough gas for a trip like that. I don't know that I'm brave enough to do a trip by myself up to the north, up past the Arctic Circle, because that is where you don't have gas for a couple hundred miles, from what I've
Hmm.
been told.
Yeah, you need to bring some with you.
Right, fuel bladder of some kind, which
Hmm.
I don't really relish the thought of that, but it's always a possibility. So what was the longest you remember of not having service?
Oh gosh. I would say it would either be uh so I think it would probably be I kind of went diagonally across Wyoming. I went uh from Salt Lake City area up through Wyoming and into the and up towards Custer and South Dakota and Devil's Tower area. And so I kind of diagonally from southwest to northeast in Wyoming. And I think that there was very, very spotty reception there. And then, of course, Death Valley, going east to west in Death Valley from Furnace Creek to Panamint Springs I don't believe I had reception at all
Okay.
from there.
They have, I didn't find it to be this way, but I'm trying to look at your map, trying to remember where it was. I believe it was in Nevada, world's loneliest highway, Highway 50, they say,
Hmm.
which there weren't a lot of people on there. I'll grant you that, but there were parts of Oregon, going down Oregon when we did one of our trips on the eastern side of Oregon, going straight down, that was like you said, with Death Valley, miles and miles of nobody.
Yep.
That was one thing. It was funny. We were on the K 1600 at the time, um, going south, and we went past one of the wildlife bird sanctuaries, and my wife likes birds, so we stopped there, and we were going south from there, and I for some reason thought I had enough fuel. Maybe I just fueled up. So we were going and going and going. All of a sudden, I'm looking on the highway in front of me, and I see something. I'm getting closer, and I'm like, that looks like an airplane. And we got closer and closer, and I'm like, that is an airplane with the engine running. And then went over a rise, and at the very over on the left was a gas station that had a bunch of motorcycles and had airplanes parked in there. They flew in on the dry lake down below,
Oh my.
taxied up to the highway, used the highway as a taxiway. Cars and motorcycles on there. What could go wrong with that? And then they pulled up to this because I saw this gas tank that had a really high. It was really high and it had a nozzle up there, and I went, "Oh, I bet you anything." And sure enough, planes pulled up to that and filled up their tanks with it. But
Wow.
it was just so funny. It was called the Field Station. I think it's Field Station, Oregon, or something like that. I got a video of the tanks of the airplanes flying on the highway and taxiing in. It was funny, but of course they had gas for the vehicle, but it was just so amazing that, out in the middle of nowhere, here's planes pulling up to this gas station.
Well, that'll surprise you. So that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, since we both sound like we're deep planners. Uh, what's the best or most interesting detour or side trip or adjustment you had to make to your plan?
Adjustments to my plan. Um,
Some unexpected serendipity that turned out well.
that turned out well is the key question. Um,
Well, for me, for example, Mesa Verde was
yeah.
actually a serendipitous uh, adventure because I had originally gone to Durango and
Okay.
I took the Durango Silverton narrow gauge steam railroad up to Silverton, and it was snowing in Silverton. And the next day I had planned to do the $1 Million Highway,
Okay.
but that night they had 2.5 inches of snow on top of the snow that they had gotten the day before. And I was not gonna do the $1 Million Highway with snow on it. And
Yes.
so I ended up looking at the map and seeing how close I was to Mesa Verde, and that's why I went. It's because I was a serendipitous detour. I wasn't expecting to go that way. Turned out to be an amazing place.
We have done that on the motorcycle. In fact, your comment about, hey, looking at the map and saying, why don't we go here? I have done side roads, some of them because I turned the wrong way, but but that's
Those
the other
usually turn
thing.
into gravel for me, but
Well, luckily with the Triumph Tiger, I've got that covered for now, which and I'm not a big off-road kind of person. That was we went to Sturgis. That's another story. But yeah, you're right. That's one of the things with planning is not to be locked into your planning so rigidly that you don't sit there and say, "Hey, that looks like an interesting place." And
Mhm.
I like your comment about the snow. The thing I've heard is that there are two rules for riding on snow. Unfortunately, nobody knows either one of them. So, but yes, I have done some different routes just simply because of the weather going bad. But going to Sturgis, 1 year, and we went in 2020. I went with a buddy who also had a Harley. We went on Harleys at the time because, of course, you got to. But
Mhm.
we were riding along, and he had chosen not highways, which again I'm perfectly good with. We got into, I believe it was Wyoming, or no, we crossed Montana, I think. we were riding along, and all of a sudden we see signs for construction, and I'm like, huh. And long story short, they had completely ripped up the road, put down deep gravel.
Oh, geez.
So as has been said, any bike is an off-road bike if you try hard enough. So here we were on two Harleys, which are not really meant for off-roading, trying to driving several miles through deep gravel. And it's just okay, don't hit the brake, don't, increase the throttle, just, smooth everything. Don't
Right.
don't
Don't do anything sudden.
don't do anything sudden. So yeah, that was funny. The other thing on that ride that was really interesting is I've lived in also in the Midwest,
Hmm.
and I know about straight line storms. And you have a couple of choices. You can either wait for them to pass over you and go on, or you can just try and go through them and just get ahead of them. So my buddy had mostly spent his life in Washington. He's he wanted to stop and get some rain gear on and maybe find some cover, but there was no cover. And I suggested we ride through it, and it was just this horrific downpour, side winds. He got pushed over at one time and got back into his lane, but it was just it was one of those storms, and it's going to happen.
Hmm.
My wife and I were up on the Continental Divide, and this was, I want to say, late July, but it was in July at the very least. Got up there, temperatures all of a sudden dropped with rain down to into the 40s. So nothing dangerous, but just cold, cold, cold. And then we got down and got found a diner to sit down and have lunch in, and she got hot everything, hot tea, hot soup.
And where was this? You said on the Continental
It
Divide?
was on the Continental Divide. I want to say it was up in Montana. I'm looking at
Hmm.
your map. It was either Montana or Wyoming, but yeah, we were up there at one of the passes, and it's so yeah. In any of these trips, especially if you're going to be doing mountains, you got to plan for cold weather, hot weather, everything. So you got to
Hmm.
have gear for dry, warm, cold, everything.
Yep. Yeah. Reminds me, one of the shortest riding days of my trip was 28 miles. I was in Denver, and my plan was to go from Denver originally up to the Rocky Mountain National Park, but
Okay,
that was closed, and the Trail Ridge Road was closed for snow. So I was going south, and I was trying to get from Denver down to Pagosa Springs,
okay.
and I got as far as Castle Rock, which is about 25 miles south of Denver, and I have a screenshot from the Denver Post website that day, 71-mile-an-hour wind gusts
Oh man,
on the highways. And that change of plans.
that's another advantage I've had with big bikes is
Yes.
the big bikes are can't be pushed around as easily. But you bring up actually an excellent point for the Western US also. Winds. I mean, Montana, Wyoming, Washington State, Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, Nevada, all those places have it will push you around all the time. So you got to get
Hmm.
used to that.
Yeah, when I came across Kansas on Route 50,
Okay.
I had 2 days across Kansas, and one day was about 45, 50-mile-an-hour winds from the left, and then the next day was 40, 50-mile-an-hour winds from the right. So at least my tires wore evenly. But when I finally I thought that was going to be some of the most I thought that was going to be some of the windiest uh, I ride, part of my ride. But when I experienced what was going on in Denver with the red flag warnings, is what they call them.
Right.
Oh man, that was a whole nother world of wind.
And safety too. It's not only your own safety, but those are the kinds of winds that truckers will get
Oh
their
yeah.
rigs blown over. So I've had I've had crosswinds where I was perfectly fine, but I'm looking at the truck in front of me and it's crossing across 1.5 lanes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there timing my pass so that I've got enough throttle that I can go past them quickly without them slamming into me. So yeah,
Yep. Yeah, you always want to spend as little time as possible next to a truck.
right. Next to, in front of, or behind. Right. Yeah. I always want to
Yeah.
get far ahead of them.
For me, it was going across Kansas. I had this very uh, weird experience, and that was the wind was coming from my left. So as the trucks would come towards me, as they passed me, I got this, second and a half break in the wind.
Right.
And then as soon as the truck passed, it was like getting smacked in the chest by full force by the wind. And it just, the first couple of times, it really took me by surprise.
Yeah. That'll happen also on roads out in the middle of nowhere where you have cliffs on your right or on your
Hmm.
left. And then there's a big field right in front of you. And right as you exit those cliffs, the wind comes slamming across the road because it's being blocked by the cliffs. So yeah, that's wind is one of those hazards you got to be careful about.
When I think about my trip, I know that there were things that I had wished I had, things I wish I had been able to experience and places I wish I had been able to go. Um, in your travels, what's still on your wish list?
On
What's
my jacket, on my motorcycle jacket, I have all the national parks as little pins.
hmm
So every time I visit a park, okay, there are a few pins on there that I didn't visit the park, but most of them I visited on my motorcycle. I would like to get every single national park on there
hmm
and do some of the forests. But you bring up actually side trips, a good point. Sometimes I like to just ride, period, but
hmm
I have to be more cognizant of looking around and finding the little things on the road, little, out of the way things that might be interesting too. So that's on me to find more interesting places that I can stop at. Side story, one of our trips was from the Seattle area down to the bottom of Las Vegas, over to Utah, or bottom of Nevada over to Utah into like the Canyonlands and the National Reef
hmm
and all that area down there. That's absolutely so gorgeous. And we visited some friends and a friend in Colorado and started coming back. And by the end of the 2 weeks, my wife was getting tired of being on a motorcycle.
hmm
She is like, I'm on the back. I'm not doing anything. It's boring. So split the difference down the middle. I dropped her off at, say, Salt Lake City
hmm
so she could fly home. And so, good, cool. So when that morning when she was getting ready to leave, getting on the bus to leave from Salt Lake City, I was getting on my bike and I said, "Okay, see you at home tonight." And she was like, "You're not going to do that, are you?" Yes, I did. 824 miles from Salt Lake City because it was the middle of July.
hmm
Of course, as you go north, you gain an hour
Yep.
and the sun is up longer and longer in the evening. I got to Pendleton, Oregon, which we talked about earlier, and looked at it and went, it's only 3, 4 hours left to get home. I might as well do it.
So is that your longest day?
That's my longest day. I want to do Iron Butt one day. I want
Okay.
to I want to plan out my Iron Butt ride sometime. We'll see. That's on my wish list. That's on my to-do list.
I'm not sure I want to do an iron. I'm not sure I want to do that.
Well,
That's
you're you're over on the East Coast. You would have to find 500 miles of straight highway to do that, and that's kind of tough for you.
yeah, but people do. People do. It's
Here, I can jump on the highway and do 70 or 80 for 500 miles
that's
easy.
true. You do have a massive speed limit advantage.
Yeah,
Most of the speed
yeah,
limits around me are 55, 65 at the most.
right, right. So yeah, but yeah, it's going to be an adventure when I do that. So
So is that a plan you have now, or is that maybe someday kind of plan?
Maybe someday, yeah. I could tell you right now I'm going to do it how I would do it. I'd jump on I-90 and just go east for 500 miles and turn around and come back
Mm.
home.
I-90 through South Dakota is one of the loneliest, most desolate places. I went through after Custer. I went through the Badlands and out to Minneapolis, and they're
I
just
love the Badlands. But yeah,
yeah, it's just there was nothing.
yeah. Well, that's the thing that I've heard about, and I'm finding interesting. Part of the coming back to Seattle after Route 66 is going to be going through Alberta.
Hmm.
And I've heard that Alberta is pretty much like Kansas. It's just flat farmland. So yeah, Kansas, I don't have a whole lot of fond memories of riding through Kansas just because it's so flat.
It is flat, and it was. But I will say, Dodge City was fun.
Okay,
They've got an absolutely fantastic museum, and if you're a fan of Doc Holliday and the movie Tombstone, Doc Holliday did spend some time in Dodge City before he went out to Tombstone, and they've got a great museum and Boot Hill and all that kind of stuff out there, and it's well done, and it's really a lot of fun. So I always like to ask people who ride, what have you done to your bike to make it yours?
so I got I
This
retired.
is the obligatory Farkle question.
So I recently retired after many years of working,
Hmm.
and my wife said, if you're going to do long trips, you need a bike that you can do long trips on. That's why I got the Triumph
Yep.
Tiger. Um, and of course, exactly like you're saying, you can't get a bike without adding stuff. The first thing I had them add was wheel protection. So I always suggest people put on their bikes. It's either a frame slider or something to protect your frame from, being all dinged up in case or when you go down as opposed to if. So
Hmm.
because we all know it's a win, not an if. So put that on there. Um, had to look at the Triumph to see what it had. So it had a temperature gauge, which is good because that's one of the things that I added to my Harley, because Harleys have a clutch and two brakes, and that's about it.
Well,
Speedometer.
now I rode a Harley for 20 years. I had
Yeah.
a 100th anniversary Heritage Classic, and it
Oh,
did
nice.
and it did have a temperature gauge. It was my inner right thigh, and when I couldn't take it anymore, it was too hot.
Right. So the Harleys are classic. You know what you got, but the Triumph has a temperature gauge and shifting gear gauge and a lot of nice things. Didn't have to add much, but I did add my mount for my Garmin GPS.
Mhm.
Wired that directly into the battery. Wired in my trickle charge for the battery, as always. I added two riding pegs, two highway pegs,
Mhm.
not for me to put my foot on, but to stretch out my leg
Mhm.
because I found that my knee kind of gets cramped up after a while. So I haven't actually added that much to the Triumph. The other thing that I had to do, I've been doing that's another thing. I also have a Hero 13 GoPro camera. You said
Mhm.
you recorded all your ride.
I did,
I'm
yeah.
I'm going to record this one too, but the Hero camera is right on my chest right here. So it gets
Mhm.
more of the rider's view as opposed to being mounted on the motorcycle somewhere.
Mhm.
So I had an older camera that recorded everything. It was cheaper, um, but it had the shake in it also. The Hero, nice thing about the Hero is it not only gets rid of the shake, but it also adjusts for the horizon.
Right.
So you're not tilted when you're watching the video. So that's not really on the bike, but it's part of the Farkle that I get for for long trips. And of course, the battery pack for both the Hero and for my camera, so that I can,
Mhm.
a lithium ion battery for those so that they can survive in case I don't have power for the night.
My favorite add-on for my bike is when I had my Harley, I got so used to having a heel toe shifter that when I on my K1600, I put a heel toe shifter on it. And so now
Oh,
I have a heel
nice.
toe shifter on it, which is I'm just so used to it. I needed to do that.
Yeah, yeah, nice.
Well, I did also put footboards on. So I have little footboards and then a heel toe shifter instead of the foot pegs and the just the toe shifter.
Yeah.
I've
Uh,
found that it really makes long distances a lot easier, and also when you need to stand up and stretch your legs for a little bit, having the footboard is a nice bonus.
That's the thing that I always couldn't figure out is all these adventure riders some of the buddies that I ride with were ADV, and they would be riding along, and all of a sudden they just stand up on their foot pegs. I'm sitting there on both the K1600 that I had and on the Harley going, how do they do that? Because I just the position I was in, I just couldn't figure out. And then I was on the Triumph Tiger. I said, well, let me try this. And I did it once and I'm like, oh, it's easy. The foot pegs are, yeah, foot pegs are appropriately placed.
Yeah, I remember I took the in the very first days of my trip, I took a class down at the BMW Performance Center, and one of the warm-up exercises that they had us doing just as we were going out to where the class was being held was standing on one peg, completely with your body to the left of the bike, and then moving over to the kneeling on the seat and then standing on the left peg and sort of getting used to moving around the bike in all different ways. Um, and that was a little unnerving as sort of the first exercise, but it also showed you that it's pretty darn stable. You can move around a little bit and not have
Yeah,
any problems.
right, right. Yeah.
Cool. So um, I always like to, whenever I talk to folks, I always like to ask, so what didn't I ask that you were hoping I did? What's something that anything that I didn't cover that you'd love to talk about?
One of the things that I, I'm in tech, and one of the things I've learned in tech is I don't remember about the things that I never knew. So I now have ridden motorcycles for a while. I have a page on my website that talks about lessons learned. So my suggestion for anybody that's just getting into this is to sit down and have a long conversation with, or getting into both long-term camping or just riding a motorcycle, period. Sit down and talk with someone who's been doing this for a while and understand what they're about to get into. Because as you and I know, it's risk tolerance.
Hmm.
You'll hear everybody tell you the story about their cousin's um, brother that died in a
Sure.
motorcycle accident.
Yep.
What they don't tell you is, were they one of these people that rode down the highway in flip-flops and shorts and a t-shirt? Or, was it just a freak accident? Or, you know, how many people die from this stuff? Yes, a bunch do. I'm not going to say that it's not for risk, but if you're going to get into this, either starting to ride a motorcycle or deciding to do long distance camping, you should probably sit down and talk with someone or research it on the internet. Look it up. Look at the some of the motorcycle
Hmm.
guides. I have a magazine that I do, which is Roadrunner.
Hmm.
So it has some good it's touring and travel. It has some good articles in there on what kind of routes, and I think they publish all their routes on their website too. But yeah, I would just suggest making sure that before you make this investment, that it's really what you want to do.
Yeah,
And
there's
then
so many different kinds of riding and so many
right,
different kinds of some people like riding with groups and going, you know, I remember the old live to ride, ride to eat.
Right.
You know, people going with groups and people doing short rides and day trips, and then some people like going long distances, and some people like going fast, and some people like going forever.
It's just, I
There's
was,
something for everybody.
yeah, I actually, bring up an excellent point. I probably will never be much of an off-road person
Hmm.
because it's not something that I would find really enjoyable. Am I going to take an off-road class? I would like to sometime,
Hmm.
just to have that knowledge. But you also bring about another point, which is choosing your people to ride with. I was just riding with someone that person I'm going to go over to Hurricane Ridge with, and our riding styles match up. There are other people that I've ridden with in the past that, for some reason, it just they just did things that irritated me. And you're with these people for a long time, and
Hmm.
I prefer one or two people on a ride, maybe three,
Right.
not the huge group rides. If
Yeah.
I'm leading a ride, I only want it to be a couple of three people, maybe, because it's a lot of work on me to make sure that everybody's together, that we all got through the light correctly, that
Hmm.
everybody's still there, corralling my little ducks to make sure that they're all with me. Um, Large group rides, if I do that, I'm usually at the back watching everybody else.
Hmm.
But they don't. Large group rides don't really interest me much. So yeah, you're right. There's all kinds of riding, and if you're really into riding, you just need to figure out what you prefer and what fits best.
Well, ride your own ride is probably the best
Yes.
advice anyone ever gave anyone on a motorcycle, and you can't let anyone else dictate how you're going to ride or where you're going to ride or how fast or how slow or twisty or cliffs or whatever.
Yep.
You've got to be comfortable with yourself and decide where and when and how you want to push yourself.
That that's a big point. I've had people push me before, and I was uncomfortable going too fast around a corner. I made it, but I still knew that I was probably pushing the limits there.
Mhm.
And you ride outside of your limits, what you feel comfortable with, and your mind's doing a lot of things that it shouldn't be doing, like paying attention to steering the motorcycle.
Mhm.
So yeah, you're exactly
Yeah.
right. Ride your own ride is very important.
So want to say thank you so much for spending the time with me and for doing this interview, and we'll get
It
this up
was
online and hopefully we'll help some new riders and help some people decide that they want to experience the pleasure of riding. Where can people find you? Where can people find your content or your notes? And I know you've written extensively about your trips.
I have a website, and I'll paste the website into the chat. Here are the motorcycle trips I have, and I also have a page for what I learned. But those are all the different places that I've been. Most of them are on the Western United States.
I'll put that in the video description so people can find it. Again, thanks so much for spending the time. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you at some point in person out on the road. Maybe on one of our maybe on some point our trips will coincide and we'll get to meet in person.
Well, it's fantastic talking to you. Thank you for doing this and for taking time out of your day to sit down and have this discussion. And yeah, hopefully sometime we'll be able to meet on the road.